This is a little sketchbook that I made for a friend of mine. It's just a tape-bound open spine book that's not case-bound like the other ones I've made in the past, but it's sewn together the exact same way. So I start with, I've actually sewn it together. I didn't record sewing that part, but I've recorded the exact same type of thing before, and I put it at the end of this video. So this one, I took the paper and I glued it to the covers of the this book board that I measured to the size of the pages, and see, the pages are all sewn together already, and I just glued it over the front of the board. This is another book that I made a long time ago, like a little edition of books. I think I made 19 of these back in 1999. And this is how it's constructed. This is what it's going to look like in the end. Well, slightly different. Those are cotton tapes. Let me show you what it looks like inside real quick. Little silk-screened knots that I cut through. Okay, let's put that away. So I was just going to show you here how I glue the Japanese rice paper that's been silk-screened onto the book board. I cut these weird angles. You don't want to do 90-degree angles, and I'll show you why in a second, because you want to be able to fold it over the corner and not leave any gaps. So each corner is cut about like that. It doesn't have to be super exact, and when you're working with paper as opposed to book cloth or leather, it's a lot more forgiving. I think I'm getting the glue. Oh no, I don't want to get my mat all gluey, and so I use a lot of disposable paper and I just keep getting rid of the paper, because the last thing you want to do is lay down the piece that you're working on in wet glue. So I put just the bare minimum of, this is a PVA glue mixed with methyl cellulose, and I put the bare minimum amount because you don't want it squishing out, but you want enough for it to stick. So that's nice and even. And then you fold, you know how there was a little bit of material left on the edge, it wasn't cut right to the end. You can fold that over after you glue the flap down. So that might be a little too much glue there, actually. Wipe it all down with a cheap $1 brush, disposable brush, and then just push it in. These small books are so much easier to make than larger books. And just fold the corners in. One thing I didn't mention is that this book board, and I mentioned this in videos before, the board is just like paper. There's a grain to it, and if you cut it the wrong way, like the way perpendicular to the way that you should be doing it, it will ruin your book over time, because moisture gets in and out of the material with humidity and stuff like that, and it will bend the wrong way and it can break your spine. And so you want to make sure that the grain of the book board, you can tell it just by bending it, is going vertical, north and south to the spine, so it's parallel to the spine. And that's what I made sure I did here. So it's nice and clean. Just get the corners down there. Now I have two nice clean book boards. Now what I want to do is figure out exactly where the tapes are on the text block. That's the stuff that I already sewed together, and I'm gonna mark on each of the boards exactly where those tapes come through. I think I made them about a centimeter, you can't see it, but very lightly in pencil I marked where each tape would correspond to the text block, because they're going to reach around the cover and go through it. That's the kind of binding this is. There's probably a name for it, but I don't know exactly what it is, because I kind of learned a lot of this stuff by just watching other friends do it. So the trick to cutting any kind of bookboard is not to go fast. Go slow. It's really hard to cut, and if you try to go fast, you're going to make a mistake. So this is going to look really sloppy and horrible, but it's not going to turn out that bad. Once you cut through the holes where that tape is going to go, you kind of have to force the hole open a little bit larger than it's going to end up being. It looks like I'm mangling this thing, and I kind of am, but I'm being careful about it too. So I want to make sure that these holes are big enough to be able to thread each of those tapes through the holes individually. So now I pretty much have that. They're probably not even quite ready. I might have to enlarge them a little more. With that, my trusty X-Acto blade. Extra blades. Who doesn't love blades? Oh, don't be cheap. If it's dull, get a new one. I get about 100 at a time. So here's where I'm threading it through. This one seems to have gone through pretty easily. Pull it through. You have to be careful when you're getting them all through that one doesn't pop out. So keep the cover steady. I often have to re-enlarge it, and I was lazy. There's a better tool for this than the X-Acto blade. You have to do the initial cut with a knife, but then sometimes a thin, long, flathead screwdriver is better, because not only can you push it through, I use the back of the blade to push it through, kind of grabs it and it doesn't cut it, but it's better to use a screwdriver. I was just too darn lazy to look for one. I don't get that much studio time, so when I get in there, I try to go as fast as possible. And I got a little bit of time in there today, so I had to go fast in order to get stuff done that I needed to do before I had to go home. Go back to working from home for the man. So I guess this has 5 tapes. That's not gonna work. I think I'm gonna have to enlarge it. Oh, I guess that did work. Oh, nice. Beautiful. Get it in there. And then after I get them all in, you kind of have to measure how tight it is, because if it's too tight, the book cover won't close all the way. And if it's not tight enough, then it's too loose, and then it'll be a floppy cover. And make it just the right amount of tautness. I'm also smoothing down what looked like a real mess before, that occurred when I was cutting the holes initially, and now that I know that these tapes are through, I can sort of smush it down a little bit. I think I'll do both sides. It's probably stupid to use a knife to move these things around, but like I said, I'm lazy. It's really easy to cut stuff, obviously, with a knife. I'm just cinching down the messy board after cutting through it behind the tapes before I make the tapes tight, so that it's nice and flat. I'm gonna end up gluing those tapes to the inside of the book cover, which you'll be able to see if I ever put this back in front of the camera, which I should do momentarily. What am I doing? There it is. Okay. So I usually do about 3 at a time. You don't want the glue to be too wet, and you don't want it to be too dry. You kind of gotta just feel for how tacky the glue is. If it's too wet, it takes too long for it to get to stick flat, and if it's too dry, obviously it won't stick at all. So I use this Teflon bone folder for most everything I do. I used to use actual bone folder. I think they make them from cow bones, but Teflon's better because it's more slippery and glue doesn't stick to it. Add a little extra glue on there for good measure. If I was really being careful and I really cared a lot, I would cut. Okay, there's two things I could do. I could cut each of the tapes to be the equal length, which I don't care, and that would look neater once the inside page is glued over the cover. What people who really care a lot do is they actually carve a little bit of the bookboard out exactly where the tape is going to be laid down and glued to the bookboard, so that it lies in a little trough so that it's completely flat with the bookboard. And that way it looks really seamless. So if I was getting paid to do this, or if I was a professional and cared a lot, I would bother doing that, but I don't think it's that necessary in this case. I mean, that takes a lot of extra time. I don't care that much about getting a little bit of glue from the inside cover onto that first page, because that first page will eventually be glued itself to those tapes anyway. I'm going to glue that little string down because you don't want that hanging loose. If it is hanging loose, there's a better chance of it actually getting broken. And this is gonna get glued down right on that cover once I feel like I have it right. I still have the opportunity to tighten the other side if those aren't quite as tight as I want them to be. I think they're pretty good though. So I put a piece of paper behind that page because I'm gonna glue that whole page now, and try to get the glue nice and even, not too thick in any area and not too thin, and do it quick enough so that it doesn't dry on anything. You also have to be careful not to let the page curl over on itself and glue its glue to the other side a little bit, because it gets the moisture immediately gets soaked into the paper from the glue, and the paper wants to curl around. Now I'm just basically smoothing it over, and with this bone folder. You can't really do this quite as well, not nearly as well with a bone folder as you can with a Teflon folder. This is what I was talking about being able to see the tapes now through this inside cover page, which again, I don't care, but some people might, which is why they like to recess the tape into the bookboard before they glue it in. I guess it doesn't take that much extra work, and maybe I'll do it someday just for fun to see what it's like to do it properly, but I didn't do it here. And these aren't super strong, durable books, but they're strong enough. Like, I wouldn't use this kind as a sketchbook without the outer case binding to protect the inside spine of the text block, but in this case, it's fine. This is the kind of the style of the book. And now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm putting that there to partly, so I put a piece of printmaking paper, usually some sort of only internally, not externally sized printmaking paper. Blotter paper works even better. That's essentially what that is. Inside after I glue the cover, because the glue does have moisture, and when glue dries, the moisture has to go somewhere, and you don't want it to go to the next page of the book, because that'll just kind of ruin that page and make it all curly and ugly. So I tend to put that piece of paper there to take up some of the water that's evaporating out of the glue, and then I can remove that piece of paper. I'm going to go through the same whole process right here. The reason I have a sticker with my name and studio on my bone folder is because I've taught bookmaking, a couple bookmaking classes, and there's a printmaking workshop below my studio, one floor below, and I've taught some bookmaking classes down there, and I don't want to lose my stuff when I bring it down there, so that's why my name's on it. Now I'm doing the same thing, flattening out those messy holes. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, so now at this point the how tight the tapes are really matters a lot. I'll tend to loosen them and tighten them several times just to make it just right, because once you glue these down, there's no changing anything anymore. That's it. You gotta start over if you don't like it. If it's too tight and it doesn't close all the way, that's a problem. And if it's too loose, it flops all over. It'll just keep getting loose and be annoying. This brush has been used. I should probably throw it away and get a new one. But laziness prevails. This is a little too long even for me, so I'm going to clip that little guy off. It's always better to start with a little bit too long of a tape. I think these are Irish cotton tapes, I think. I get them at Tallis Book Supply Store. TALAS online is the website. They're a really good book supplies place. They sell archival materials for restoring old prints and drawings, as well as materials to restore and create books. They have a lot of, from the super professional stuff to, there isn't really any amateur stuff there, but it's it's worth getting the good stuff from a place like Tallis, as opposed to Line Co. Is a company that sells a lot of book supply stuff to small art supply stores all over the country, and they're fine to a certain degree, but eventually you want to get better and more stuff specifically to how you want to make books, and Tallis is the place to go. There's another place somewhere in Maryland I used to order from, but Tallis is right here in New York City, so I tend to go there. So this is my buffer page to absorb that's actually just to prevent me from getting glue everywhere. This I did screw up. I will screw up. See that right there? It wasn't too bad, but I did get glue on the other side. This particular paper is relatively forgiving, and I can kind of, it didn't really cause much of a problem here. I would prefer that I wasn't sloppy and that didn't happen, but I did, and but you'll see that it's really not going to be an issue. See, there's a little bit of glue there, but you can kind of wipe it off before it dries if you use just a barely slightly damp piece of paper towel right there. And dirt sticks to the glue like crazy, but you can actually rub this glue off of the paper right before it dries. It kind of balls up a little bit, which I did here, and so I didn't end up with any yucky marks. But you don't want any air bubbles in this paper. See how it just kind of balls up and goes away? It's kind of miraculous. It doesn't do that on all paper, and you've got to know exactly when to do it.
if you do it when it's too wet, it's just going to smear everywhere, and if you do it when it's too dry, it won't go anywhere. So it just takes a little experience of knowing when to fix your boo-boo. Oh, there's a little piece there. That one might stay. Those little specks are just the dried glue that is just sitting on top. There you go. And this is pretty much it. What I like to do again is put a piece of absorbent paper in between a freshly glued piece of paper and the rest of the text block so that it doesn't curl up the next page. And yeah, sorry about the non-focus of the camera. I pretty much film these all on my iPhone, and then it's just resting on a piece of wood right above my head that I'm trying not to bump into. And that's basically the whole thing. These are really simple. There's a gap there, and that's just how the binding is, and it's not wiggly or it won't get larger. That's just the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. And there we go. But you can see how the tapes on the inside cover and how that could bother some people, which is why they recess them into the cover before they glue them down. Doesn't bother me though. Now I'm just gonna recap how to sew these tape-bound text blocks together. This is a much larger one I did for a sketchbook that's going to be case-bound, but it's the exact same method. So I just thought I'd put this here so that you can see how I do it. It's pretty simple. And I explain it further in other videos, but the holes are pre-drilled or poked. I just sew one signature after another, go relatively slow so that the string doesn't get tangled or broken as you're going, and just back and forth, in and out. The trick here is kind of knowing exactly when to tug on the string to make it taut. Or the thread. It is coated in beeswax so that it tends to stay put after you leave it. It doesn't pull back again. But even so, you still have to pull it tight at a certain point. Once I go through here, I'm going to pull it in a specific direction one way. If you pull one way, it'll rip through the signature, and you've got to pull that out and start over. And if you pull the other way, it'll make it nice and tight, and it's just the way you want it. So it takes practice remembering that. I've ruined many signatures. You also have to make sure your string is never too twisted, because as you pull it through, it will knot up, and that beeswax makes it even harder to take knots out. So you may have to just cut the thread and then backtrack until you have a point in a signature where you can sew a new piece of thread, tie a new piece of thread on. And I think that's all I need to say about this.
on.